Everybody, hey, welcome to Separation Nation. We're excited to be bringing another podcast to you today. And as always, listen, we want to invite you to like this when you see it on social media, like the YouTube videos, share it, help us get the message out there, and help us get people exposed to Separation Nation. Listen, we want everybody listening and watching. We're continuing to experience great growth with the podcast. And so we just ask you to, it doesn't cost you anything to gain from the value and the entertainment and what we bring to you every week here on Separation Nation. So we just ask you to just pay that basic due of helping us get the message, share it out, leave us a review on the podcast platform of your choice where they'll allow you, on Spotify or on Apple to go on podcast and leave a review, maybe on an episode that really touched you, something that brought some great value to you, was life-changing, impactful, and just continue to help us build the nation here on Separation Nation. And so we're real excited about several other things, too. Before we get into it today, we've got a special guest that I'm going to announce here in just a minute. We're super excited to have on with us. It's going to be our first podcast today due to travel restrictions and things going on where our guest is actually calling in and going to be here. If you're watching this on YouTube, you'll be able to see a picture of this gentleman's beautiful face, Mr. Matt Rush, and we're gonna announce him here in just a second, kind of help you understand who we got on today and the value that he's going to be bringing. Just written a book, and we're going to talk more about that. But we want to take just 1 minute before we do that. If you're watching this, we've got a few items laid out here on the table. You see the white buffalo cap that just came in about an hour ago from our production company, and they've just got a brand new version of the white buffalo logo. Listen, if you don't know what the white buffalo is, go back and listen to episode 5 of Separation Nation. And of course, we also got brand new socks, man, super comfortable. You can wear those with, if you like us and like to wear crazy dress socks under your dress slacks when you're wearing a suit. These work for that, but we really put a lot of time in to make sure with the company that we ended up picking something that was extremely versatile. So my wife wore them to the gym, rocked them this week, and so they're thick enough for that. But at the same time, when you put them on, man, they look great, and so they work for both worlds: business, casual, gym. And so we want you to go to agentsresourcegroup.com, click on ARG Gear, and we're continuing to add more and more items every week. This white buffalo cap that you see here, along with that exact logo on a T-shirt, is going to be put on the online store. If it's not there tonight, they're actually working on it as we speak, our merchant people. But if it's not there tonight, it'll be there tomorrow. Cool gear, great quality, just cool, what I call attitude apparel to have, especially if you're in the sales industry, if you're a driven, motivated person. If you listen to this podcast, we know you are. So go check that out at agentsresourcegroup.com. So let's get to our guest that we got here today, calling in all the way from, actually, you in Texas or New Mexico today? You right on the border.
I am actually right on the state line, even as we speak,
there you go,
brother.
As we speak. So Matt Rush is a great friend of mine that, somebody we've kept up with each other now ever since 2014. And I met Matt out. He'd been involved with Zig Ziglar and the Ziglar Corporation, our friend Tom Ziglar, years before I was, is my understanding on that. Correct me if I'm wrong, Matt. But Matt's in the speaking world, a sought-after, highly acclaimed speaker, author, and he travels literally all over the country speaking to corporations, social groups, training, for major corporations, and just a really gifted guy, phenomenal communicator. You can't help but, just when he speaks, he's one of these guys that has the gift of communication, and to really be able to drive home. You can feel the qualities and the character of this gentleman when he speaks. And, in all my affiliation with Ziglar, there's a handful, and I've said this when we've had, David Kaufman was on here several months back, and there's a handful of people that I really felt, it's like like spirit. Just, I mean, people that I got along well with and that really connected, feel like we got some of the same mojo. And those are the people that I've really stayed in contact with. And that's no slight to anyone else that's come through Ziegler Legacy certification. But just some folks, you tend to connect with more in life, and we've kept up with each other. His beautiful wife, Katie, since I first met him, he's a married man now, and so anyhow, we're just so excited to have him on. He's just written a new book. He, along with his co-author Rich Taylor, and it's called Stress Free You. And so we're so glad to have you on today. We appreciate you being here with us, Matt.
Brother, I can't thank you enough for having me as a guest, but mostly thank you for what you just said. Obviously, you've been talking to my mama because no one else believes any of that besides my mama. Hey, but it's an honor, man. I truly appreciate what you guys are trying to do and just the leadership that you guys are giving everybody. So I consider it a great honor to be on the call. I wish we could be in person. That was our initial goal, was to be in person, and that's not going to happen yet. But that means we'll have to do it again later. So truly an honor to be able to hang out with you guys and try to spread a little gooderness in the world.
That's right. And Matt's the gooder guy, and you'll learn that about him. And again, we'll throw up all his information on this and mention it several times and again before we end the podcast. But you can go to mattrush.com, and then you can also go to stressfreeyou.net, which is the site for his new book, to learn more about him. But he's the gooder guy. So if you ever see Matt Rush, he finds a way to take the word gooder and fit it into about anything, and it's just something that sticks with you. And
did I ever tell you where that came from?
I don't know if you did. Tell us about it.
I was actually crazy thing because being a motivational speaker, you feel like you constantly have to step up your game a little bit. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So I can't even remember what store I was at, but I was about to check out, and the poor lady behind the counter, she looked like she'd been weaned on lemons, just looked like she's having a kind of a bad day. And I said, being the motivational speaker dude that I am, I said, well, how are you today? And she looks up at me with this almost a scowl, and she goes, I'm good. How are you? And I said, well, I'm gooder. And she laughed. And I said, and that is where it's going to be. And so that's how it all got started, was just I threw it out there and caught somebody's attention, and it made it different. And I think that's part of what we try to do, is we try to make people just look at things maybe just a little bit different, because if we can, a lot of times that's just all we need to be able to have a better attitude, have a better outlook, whatever that might be. Looking at things a little differently. So yeah, and pay attention too, because we're about to roll out some swag of our own. So
some gooder swag.
I'm gonna have my white buffalo and my gooder swag on, and I'm gonna be like the gooder white buffalo.
That's killer. Well, we're gonna send you some swag after the. We already got your package ready. We're gonna send you some so you can rep that, and when you get your gooder apparel, be sure to send that, and we'll rep that out here, man. But that's really what it's about. Is just getting the message out. And for those of you that's listening to the podcast at this point, you hear what I was explaining to you when I was telling you about, I call him Rush, but Matt Rush, and just, I mean, when he communicates, it's infectious, and it's hard to be in a bad mood when you're talking to Matt Rush, because he's going to make the mood gooder if you've had a bad one. I can tell you that. But
well, thanks, man. I really appreciate that. I feel like I'm in my calling, and for those of you who are in your calling, you know what that means, and you know what a difference that makes in your life. Now, that being said, too, though, that doesn't mean I'm constantly asked, especially when I was flying every week somewhere, I was constantly asked, well, do you ever have a bad day? And I think that's almost a foolish question, because obviously there's going to be bad things that happen in a day, but there's always something good inside of that as well. So it's all just about our perspective and how we look at things, because I hope that I can truly live what I preach, because if I don't, that makes me a hypocrite. And I want to be the leader of my own, of our own cause. I say, hey, we don't want much. We just want to start a positive revolution in the world, because doggone it, the world's crying out for it and is absolutely in need of it. And we can't change the world, but we can change ourselves, and that's all we can do. And if we enough of us do that, then we create that revolution that we know we need to start.
Absolutely. And in your story where Gooder come out, I mean, obviously that woman sounds like she was stressed herself, not having a good day. And, this book that you've written, in my opinion, couldn't have came at a better time in the
Oh no.
in the history of this country. And by the way, people, this book, Stress Free You, phenomenal read, and it's available on Amazon as well. So we encourage you to go there and get your copy of it. But in the book, you talk about stress switches, and you talk about so many people try to manage stress, or they try to find an activity or something to relieve stress. We hear the phrase stress relief, and one thing that I've really never heard anybody address from the level that you're coming at and the angle that you're coming at it with. But basically, you're saying, there those tactics don't work. Stress relief doesn't really work. There's no way to manage stress. What you have to do is turn off those switches. And you say, I mean, y'all done the research. There's thousands of switches that each of us have. And I know the place we're at as a country right now, I have dealt with more uh, stress, probably a lot of it self-imposed, watching too much news. For those of you that are
Hmm.
listening to this podcast, I believe we're coming out on the other side of, in some states more than others, of basically quarantine, lockdown, COVID-19, this virus situation, no matter what your opinion of it is. And we've all got an opinion, but we're, thankfully, thank the Lord, it looks like we're going to get back to somewhere near normal. And I don't like new normal. I want to go back to normal, dadgummit. But so I don't really like that phrase. But this book
No.
coming at this time is absolutely phenomenal timing. It's a godsend, and I know
Literally.
I've dealt with it a lot during this, just having to really protect my mental state. Your state controls your fate, and trying to really stay positive, focus on the things that I can control to help keep me, from worrying about all the things that I can't control. That was bringing me all this stress. So, talk a little bit about your concept, and if how you ended up getting involved in this project. Maybe how did
Sure.
this become a topic for you, and then talk to us a little bit about the approach that you highlight in the book.
Sure. That's perfect. That and literally, and obviously, I don't know where all your viewers and listeners are coming from spiritually. I'm going to say this because it's just a fact for me. The way this came about was a total godsend in and of itself, because the guy that I co-wrote the book with, his name is Rich Taylor. Rich lives in Tampa, Florida. Rich and I have actually, this is hard to believe, we have actually never met in person.
Hmm.
And yet we talk on almost a daily basis. I feel like I know him as well as my own family, love him dearly. Rich, and the way we met was Rich has done all of the graphic design work for the Zig Ziglar family for decades.
I didn't know
And
that.
prior, yeah, he's the one that lays all the work out. And prior to that, he was one of the behind the scenes brain children of the Get Motivated seminars.
Really?
So here's a guy that's worked behind the scenes in the leadership motivational speaking world. He's worked with 6 different presidents, celebrities, any kind of famous person, speaker you can imagine. He worked with them when they were putting on those Get Motivated seminars, which would fill stadiums with people. I
Yeah.
mean, remember in the 90s, 2000s, I mean, that was the ticket. If you could get to one of those things, man, and Zig Ziglar was normally the closer, just phenomenal. So he and I met because he started doing all my graphic design work, because the Zigglers referred him, said, "Hey, well, this is who does ours," and he took it, and just that's how we met. Is he does all my work. And one day I called him because I've got this other concept that we're working on, that Katie and I are working on for some leadership content, and it's a different approach as well, and that's another topic for another time. But when I was talking to him about what I wanted to do and how I wanted it laid out, he made a statement I'll never forget as long as I live. He said, none of this stuff matters if someone is stressed. And I said, well, you can say that again, because stress is an emotion, and emotion will override fact every time. In fact, that's what I posted this morning on mattrush.com, on Facebook, and on Instagram. I posted that quote: emotion will override fact every time. In other words, if you're in a highly emotional state, if you're under any kind of stress, reality gets blurred, and you can't. Sometimes it's almost impossible to get the facts, to get to reality, because you're in this emotional state. So that's how it began. And he said that God had put this on his heart to do something to deal with stress. He said, but I want you to help me write this. And that's how it began. We spent over a year putting it together, going back and forth. We had sent it to the editor, had got it out of our hands and off our plate. And then that process just slowed down and it took a lot longer than I would have expected it to take. And I never got upset or never got frustrated about it, even though I was ready for it to come out. And I'm like, you know what? It's going to come out when it's supposed to come out. And then when she sent it back to us and then all this hit, we're like, okay, now that's definitely a God thing, because you're right. There's never been a time in the history of the world, in our recent world, in our world anyway, that it's more applicable than it is right now. So that's how it began. And it began with the intent and the purpose to just try to help people deal with stress. Because if I can help people deal with stress and overcome stress, then hopefully we can start putting in some of the good, the positive, the pure, some practical lessons in leadership, people building, whatever you want to call it. Then you can actually accept those things and hopefully have a better a chance of getting them implemented into your everyday life. Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense. And that's crazy. And because the very reason that, we had talked about maybe having you on later in the year when we could travel and we could get you here in person. And, me doing the best I can to keep up with everything. I had just, all of a sudden, I think I jumped on one of you and Katie's lives and commented a few weeks back. And that was the first time, if you'd put anything out before that, I had just, in living life, I had missed it. But that was the first night I realized, hey, the man's wrote a book about stress. And that's what got my wheels turning. I was like, because at that point, we're already, well into the entrance of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Or as I call it, the scamdemic.
Scamdemic.
If that bothers you and you're a listener, then you just have to overlook me. But
doesn't bother me.
But so as I was, that's when it all clicked for me, and I was like, man, we're going to have to go ahead. Which I know we've got the equipment and everything. Had never done that before, but got the equipment to be able to do this over the phone and it still be quality. So I said, this is the time to fire that up. And timing is everything, and we need to get him on here now. And we'll definitely get you back when we can have you in person. You'll have another project by then out, I'm sure. But I mean, let's back up. I mean, what is stress? What do you consider stress? Your definition of stress?
Okay, so for me, and it's going to be a little different for everyone, but what we're talking about when we're talking about stress are just those outside pressures that I feel like just push against us or gnaw at us internally, or just weigh us down. And really and truly, what I really want to differentiate is there's two different kinds of stress that I want to address. And that is, we have everyday stress, and then we have life stress. Okay, what we're dealing with right now is a major life stress. And people have said several times, well, you don't know my life. I could never be stress free. And I'm like, well, you're right. I don't know your life. But I do know that we have a lot of stuff coming at us that we have allowed to become a new normal that shouldn't be. And then when we have a real life stress, we're already so strung out and so wound up that we snap and we can't handle it. And so let me maybe clear that up a little bit too. When I'm talking about a life stress, I've told people in the last 9 months, I've had probably as much life stress as I could imagine. My wife was hit by a drunk driver while I was on the phone with her, and I didn't know if she lived through it.
Mm.
I came down with a bacterial infection, crazy thing, ended up in the hospital and sick. Getting back on our feet, we've got more gigs booked than I'd ever had in my career. And then literally over the course of 2, 3 days, I watched a six-figure income go to zero in the short term.
Mhm.
So that's life stress, right? Okay, that's a lot too. I mean, anytime you look at that, that's
That's a
like, okay, that's
pile.
a lot. But at the same time, I know that because we had been working on this stuff, I was able to handle some of the big stuff because I had started turning off the switches. And I'll address that too. When we're talking about stress switches, we have become so accustomed as a society to being so fast paced, so gung ho, so much going on that what is normal now wasn't normal even 10, 15 years ago. Okay, and you said it earlier, so I'll use it as an example, and it's one of my favorite stress switches to talk about, and that is what we call the news blackout. And we call turn the news off. Like there's nothing positive on the news anymore. It wasn't that long ago that the news came, your local news came at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock evening news, the 5:30 on your local news, and that was 30 minutes. You within that 30 minutes, you had the news, you had weather, you had sports, and you had commercials and lifestyle interest. And then you had that, and then you that was followed by the 6 o'clock evening news with one of the guy, one of the people that
Hmm.
delivered that, and then that was it. So you had a maximum of an hour that might happen. And now we're in this day and age where we think we should have 24-hour news cycles. And I'm like, okay, there's a difference between being informed and being inundated.
Right.
And we have allowed ourselves to become inundated with so much negativity that, good grief, I had to go through a detox. I mean, and it started off with I'm a political junkie. I love politics. I ran for office, but so I like it. But when I realized what was coming at me every night and what I was inviting into my home and into my life, and I went through a detox and I turned it off. I said, I'll give it a week. I'm going to go for a week and not watch any of the national news. That's the way I started because I still want to be informed of what's going on around me. So I said, okay, I'll keep the local guys. And that's how it began. And now when I turn the news on or if I walk in the airport and one of those TVs is on, you're like, oh, good grief, this is horrible. Like I can't hardly even stand to watch it anymore. So and I still know what's going on. I'm still informed. I'm not saying that. So that's one of the switches that we have allowed to be turned on in our lives that we don't need to have anymore. And we can even take it to the other level too, and especially before COVID. One of our stress switches, we call it the seventh haven. And used to there was a downtime when you got home at the end of a day of a work day, whenever that was for you, you were home. And you didn't pick work back up until you got back to it the next morning. But because of technology now, we are so plugged in that we never leave work. And work is with us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We expect people to answer when we send something, and other people expect it as well. And so there's never that time to actually allow yourself to rest and restore and repair. So that's what I'm talking about in the book, and what Rich and I feel like we've been gifted with these stress switches. And there's 103 of them in the book. Obviously, that's not going to apply to everybody, and if it did, you probably have bigger problems than we can fix. But
That's right.
so, but there's some. I know that there are 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 of those switches that every one of us could start to turn off to stop slowing the input, so that when we have a life stress, we're more prepared to be capable to handle it. Because our bodies, from the beginning of creation, we were given two states of being to be in, and everybody's heard this before. We know that we had a fight, flight, or freeze mode. In other words, saber-toothed tigers chasing us. You're either going to fight it, run away from it, or hide, stand and freeze and hope it doesn't find you. And then the rest of the time, when you're not being chased with your life being threatened, You're supposed to be in rest, digest, and restore mode. And yet we flipped it around. We flipped it around to where we're in fight, flight, or freeze mode 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We don't ever stop. And we rarely even get into rest, digest, and restore mode. So, how are we supposed to then handle life stresses? How are we then supposed to deal with what we have to deal with in life? How are we supposed to give to others if we're not allowing ourselves to be refilled and refueled? So that's kind of the basis of the book. And we're like, you know what? We've got to do something to be able to help people turn off what has become the accepted normal and recreate a normal so that we can have that life of love, joy, peace, and a sound mind, which then allows us to fulfill our true purpose of whatever that is.
Matt, one thing you said about blackout in the news and everything kind of goes back to another statement you made earlier that I wrote it down because it impacted me so much. Emotions will override facts every time. And one of the problems we have with news media is there's very few facts anymore. It's all
Ooh,
emotional. It's all trying to trigger our emotions to go after ratings and what what can kind of get us emotionally stimulated. And facts are very, very hard to find. And I think that's why
yeah,
we stay so stressed out, you know.
it's true. And my post this morning on the fan page thing was I woke up real early this morning and couldn't go back to sleep, and I just got to thinking. You try to use those times as when I can't go back to sleep. I'm like, okay, what do I need to be? What I need to be hearing? This is a moment I can have of pure, true, quiet stillness. And this morning it was like, okay, this is what I needed, and this is what I needed to say. And I posted that thing, and I was like, so many times we are confronted with an emotionally driven report or news feature or post or story or whatever it is, and we want to react to it. And instead, we should catch our breath, maybe even for just 10, 15 seconds, so that then we can actually respond. And there's a big difference between reacting, which is emotion driven, and responding, which is thought driven. We could even pull it into a psychological standpoint, and you can pull up all kinds of research on this. I'm not even that smart, and I can find all this stuff. You can find that an emotional response like that is a reaction, and we need to just be able to catch our breath for even a split second so that we can respond. And really, that some of those reports we found for the book and in studying, you'll find that it shows where in different parts of the brain those responses even come from. And number one, that's how cool God wired us. But we've gotten in a bad habit of not ever getting to that state. And we just want to, I say we're just firing the hole all the time.
So kind of
And
kind of what you're saying on that is and I didn't mean to cut you off, but and I'm asking these questions for me, okay? Because
okay,
I deal with stress. Stress is a big topic for me, and so but it sounds like we react with our emotions, but we respond with facts. Is that what you're saying?
oh, yeah, that's a brilliant way to say it. I'm a motivational speaker and a trainer, so I have to use more words because they pay me for more words. But you said it succinctly. That's 100% the way it is. Is we respond, we react with emotions, we respond with our brain, with our thinking, with our thought processes. So we got to be able to turn some of the stress off so that we can actually be more adept at dealing with what life is going to throw at us on a daily basis.
And that's one problem I have, and I know a lot of listeners have that. But you talk about rest and digest and restore. I mean, tell us, how do you get there for someone like me that's hard to turn it off? I'm in fight or flight or freeze at all times, usually fight or flight. I'll just be general with it. It's usually fight. Stay
Sure.
engaged, a lot of times, and just, it's just hard to turn it off to get to the rest, digest, and restore. I mean, give us some tips on that.
Okay. And I hope everyone can probably figure out pretty quick that I am a very passionate person. I believe what I believe really fully, and I get into it, right? So I am an emotional person by nature. So before we really started getting into all this, I was that person too. Man, I could fly off. I could be the life of the party. I could be the go 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 and I. In fact, it was so bad when after Katie and I first got married, she looked at me one day when I had not stopped for a spell. I mean, my last name is Rush for peace sake. That nothing about that says I'm slow, right?
Right.
So Katie looked at me one day and she goes, "Who do you think you are?" I said, "Even God took a day off after 6 days of creation." And I was like, "Oh, that kind of hurts, you know." It makes it a little
She
personal.
slapped you right upside the head with that one, didn't she?
That's what most of those our lovely other halves are good for, right? So for me, I'm going to be totally transparent. This is the one piece of me that was the one I had to lecture myself to get into because I was raised that you don't be lazy. And I felt
Yeah.
like if I was in rest, digest, and restore mode, whatever that meant I was lazy. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And that's not
100%.
me. So I had to start carving out small amounts of time just to stop. And so what I started doing was and it really was pivotal in the development of this book was in the morning. For me, it's more I'm a morning person. So for me, it's mornings. I needed the first few minutes. I just started making myself be grateful. Hey, and Justin, a lot of this comes from Bob Bodine's Two Chairs book.
Yeah.
Like that was kind of the start for me. Was I if I'm not starting my day off having a conversation with just me and God, even if it's for just 5 minutes, then there's something really wrong with my priorities for the day. So I had to just start carving out some small segments. And it was literally in the 5 and the 10 minutes. Now it's kind of to the point now that I like, okay, I realize I need to stop for a second. So I can stop for 30 minutes and I can have some quiet time. I can have some just flow, not go, and and let myself be recharged. And that may sound really oversimplistic, but I had to do that because that was a big hurdle for me. But and then we took it to also, then Katie and I getting married, and she came from a family that they took, believe this or not, they took family vacation every year. I grew up in a house that we farmed all summer and we ranched all winter, and there was never a vacation. I remember 2 vacations as a kid in my lifetime. So then Katie comes in, she goes, "What? You can't even stop for your family?" And I was like, "Dad, go with these women. What it means? She's beating this truth right into me." And that's when I realized it's okay to take time off to refill yourself because I had found myself pouring and giving and going and doing so much that I was starting to feel empty and I wasn't allowing myself to be recharged. And I think getting that through my thick skull has really allowed me to do even more than I was before by just being able to stop and let myself rest and digest and restore even 5-10 minutes a day at first and then let's take it to a whole vacation. Let's prove a point here too. How many people that are watching or listening have ever gone on vacation and came back more tired and exhausted than when they left? Right? I would say the majority of people in the world have done that.
Oh, well.
Okay, there's something wrong with us mentally if we're not allowing ourselves even to stop long enough to refill on a family vacation. So it's about how do we stop the stress from flowing in so that we can have those moments that we can actually start to allow ourselves to be refilled and refueled. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So, I mean, because I talk to a lot of people, and especially in our industry, and everybody's kind of got their thing, the thing that they do that helps them, decompress and alleviate stress, or at least they think they do, and really, I think that's what you're talking about in dealing with the actual switch instead of just trying to get relief from it. Because think about getting relief, whatever your thing is. I mean, when you're doing that, you're still going to end up coming back to it. You can't work out but so long,
Yeah.
I love to cook, which is crazy to a lot of people. My wife don't understand that because that stresses her out, But for me, cooking and getting out, spending Saturday and barbecuing and all. I mean, that now I don't like the clean up part. That'll stress me the heck out. But I love to make a mess as long as I don't have to clean it up, And so, but getting out and cooking and having some people over, enjoying some food and some wine, and that for me that's a stress relief. But eventually the meat's going to be done. You're going to have to take it off the grill. People's going to eat. The party's going to be
Yeah.
over. Folks are going to go home, and then it's you and your stressors again. So if we can't really get true relief from it, all we can do is maybe hit pause for a few minutes or escape for an hour or two.
Yeah. It's like trying to drain a cell phone battery with it still plugged in.
Exactly. I mean, how do we get to the root of that?
Okay, so for me, and part of what we really want people to start considering is, even within these stress switches, what are you doing that is keeping you in a stressed state, and how can you start to deal with it so that when you have so that then a stress relief like a cooking or yoga or whatever it is for somebody is actually then refueling, not just giving you a break from it.
Yeah.
I think that's the difference of mentality that we want people to start looking at is, what do I need to turn off and deal with so that then I can have those moments that actually then recharge me, not just give me a pause like you said. And the other analogy that I always like using is, there's some people that are listening and watching and they'll say, yeah, but I operate better under a little bit of stress and under a little bit of pressure. And to those people, I always say, what's better, having a big black widow spider in your bed or a small black widow spider in your bed? And neither are good. If you don't start turning off some of the inflow of the negative that's coming in, you can't ever get into that true state of rest, digest, and restore.
Mm.
And this is the other one that's really personal to me. I used to jokingly have a motto, and that said, my motto was suppressed is best. Just keep your feelings to yourself. Yeah, I don't need to share your mind. You don't need to share yours, right? Okay, there's nothing about that that's healthy. There's nothing about that that makes any sense. And there's even a chapter in the book that I wrote, that I wrote the analogy to. Rich and I obviously helped. We did it all together. But the analogy I used was putting a cork in a volcano. If you're not dealing with some of this stuff to stop the inflow, so that then you can have that state of rest, digest, restore, eventually the lid's going to come off. Eventually the top's going to blow, and you're going to spin out of control.
Mm.
So we started this coaching program for people that wanted one-on-one help, and there's a young guy that he's probably in his young 30s. He's got a lot of responsibility. He's very, very good at what he does. His bosses see his work ethic and his morals and his ethics and his just, so they have naturally promoted him. And he told me, he said, I'm to the point now that I'm not in control anymore. I am absolutely on the verge of collapse. And I think I'm just going to have to quit my job, walk away from it all, and start over doing something else. So obviously he's got so many inputs turned on and he's not dealing with any of it right. And so it just eats your lunch. So we've been working through some steps. Okay, like, okay, let's ask some questions. Like, what can you actually deal with? Let's start with that first. I mean, maybe that's the simplest question. What can you actually do right now today that would eliminate some stress from your life? It may be the smallest thing. Do that one thing now, and you'll be shocked at the change it makes in your life.
Mm. One thing that you talk about in the book, it's basically you got there down there's a 300% failure rate that people experience when it comes to diets and budgets and exercise and any kind of positive life program, any type of positive change that they make. And so, I mean, that's a big cavern right there to fall in. I mean, 300%, but we know it because we see it. I mean, how many people do we see that they talk good, but talk's cheap, but they never follow through. And how does that relate into this stress picture?
Well, that's really kind of, and I probably should have addressed that really earlier on when I was talking about where Rich's background. When Rich was dealing with all these huge celebrities and all these mega events, and the material that everybody puts out there is so sensational,
Right.
and yet the implementation rate is so abysmal.
Mhm.
I mean, you can leave those events, you can be fired up. You can start a diet and you can be fired up. You can start any kind of positive life change program and you're fired up about it. And day one, it goes good. You're so excited. You start telling your friends about it. Day two's better. Day three, you're kicking along. You might slow down a little bit, but you're still in it. Day four, man, you've got goals till the next 4 years. And then day five, everything falls apart at the office. Your boss yells at you. Your spouse doesn't even like you anymore because you're such a jackwagon. Whatever it is, it all goes south. And then that life change program goes out the window. And we've all done it. We've all failed. The reason we say 300% is because we've all started something and failed at it at least 3 times. I guarantee it. Almost every one of us have done it at
Some of us
time.
300 times.
Yeah, exactly, right? So when we say 300% fail rate, you always get these people look at me. I'm like, how many diets or self-help programs have you started and not completed? So was the material bad? No, the material's good, but the one thing that nobody dealt with was stress in advance of starting it. And so what I think makes this concept so revolutionary is we're not asking people to do more to accomplish something. We're actually asking them to do less.
Mm.
And the amount of freedom that it gives you is just life changing. Because then once you start handling stress first and you start putting it in its place, then your odds of starting a diet, a health program, a wealth program, whatever it might be, your odds of success have just increased exponentially.
Absolutely. So many people don't know how to, you got to prioritize your life. You got to keep the main thing the main thing. I was scrolling through some of our scheduled posts that are going to be coming up through our company pages and all, and one that's going to be coming out in the next week or so. I saw that really caught me, but it said, I wonder how much of the load we bear is not ours to carry to begin with.
Ooh, so true.
And you got all these people walking around, worried about all these things you can't change, worried about, and I realize it's hard sometimes. I mean, I've been through situations with family members and some, a family member that is related to you, but at the same time, unrelated to you because they've got issues or things that they're dealing with that really doesn't affect your own household, but because of the love factor, because you love them, because you got the same blood flowing through your veins as theirs, that can become a weighty issue, and it can weigh you down, even though you don't have any control to change it. So
That's right.
there is some sticky situations like that too. It's easy to just say, well, not my circus, not my monkeys, the old Chinese proverb that I try to practice, with a lot of things that jump on me sometimes. But then there's those situations that due to, you love the individual or you got a heart for people or you care about this. Sometimes it's really hard to navigate when you shouldn't be carrying it and bearing it. But nonetheless, you find yourself there. But I believe so many of us carry the weight of so many issues and listen, not just other people's issues or issues of I talk about all the time. I mean, nobody has the ability to affect your life or shipwreck your life or better your life more than you do. Not the president, don't matter who's the president, who's your governor, who's the mayor. I mean, the world economy, the situation politically, none of that ultimately can affect us nearly as bad as we train ourselves to think sometimes. Because nobody's, if it will be, it's up to me. Nobody is in control of your life more than you. I mean, I've been through bad economies, I've been through good economies, and I've watched people, the people that thrived, they thrived because they corrected their mental state. They took control of their mindset. They focused on what they could control instead of bearing all the weight of the world and all these other things. And taking me back to that original statement, how much weight is people carrying that's not their load to bear to begin with? How much more efficient would we be? How much more proficient would we be? How much more would we accomplish and be able to achieve? And how much more could we build if we wasn't taking so much of our energy and our time and our mental state and just basically letting it, like buckshot? I mean, it's just scattered all out everywhere instead of being like that lethal, sniper, really taking out those key things that we need to be focused on in our own life. And we see it all the time in our company, managing all the agents and producers we do, and we get to see the inside of a lot of life and a lot of different lives and different ways people live it. And it's amazing. Some of your highest achievers, some of your top producers, most focused people, they have the ability to basically put blinders on all this stuff that shouldn't be affecting them, and they know to just go out each and every day and control what they can control. And then some of the people that we see seem to always be getting their tail kicked in life. I mean, broke, busted, disgusted. They'll have a good week, and then the wind's knocked out of them. And I can't win. I can't catch a break. Well, it's because they're getting involved and taking on people's problems and helping family members out. Listen, you helping the same family member out that's used you for 20 years over and over and over again, and you can't pay your bills, and every time they show up at your door 20 years later, you still giving them $100. You still sitting up keeping their kids where all these distractions and these things that people take on, and it's not their responsibility to begin with.
That's
and
right.
So a lot of stress, I believe, is self-imposed.
Oh, yeah, that's absolute. And there's a quote that I put in the book that I've used for a long time, and I don't know where it originated from, and I turned it around, kind of made it my own. And it says, I say that the greatest enemy you'll ever face is the one that lives between your ears,
Absolutely.
because you will do more to stop you than any other person on planet Earth.
Yeah.
And we let stress rule the day to the point that it does paralyze us to be able to move forward. And one thing that I don't want anyone to think or hear what I'm not saying, we still have stressful moments. I had one today. Y'all had one getting ready for this recording. I mean, there are going to be things that happen. Has it been stressful what has happened with this scamdemic? Absolutely. It has been a major stress on Katie and I, financially, physically, whatever, however you want to say it. So you really do have two options. How are you gonna look at it? Are you gonna pivot and not let the stress get you down and figure out ways to then come out of it even stronger than you went into it? Or are you going to start turning internal, which we say, it's really one of the words we haven't even used yet is we all have go-tos. So whenever you have a bad moment or a bad day, or you start carrying that weight on the world on your own shoulders, since we were little bitty kids, we have these go-tos that have been embedded in us. And because I can guarantee you, majority of people had a bad day in elementary school and came home, and your mama doesn't say, "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry you had a bad day. Here, have a bowl of broccoli." No, she said, Mama was like, "Here, have a box, have all the cookies, little fat man." I mean, our go-tos are never, are rare. I should say never. Our go-tos are rarely positive. So when we let stress drag us down, when we let the weight of the world start dragging us down, then we start going to these negative go-tos because we can't handle it and we're wanting to retreat. Well, that's nothing but a sadistic mental state that we don't need to be in. Mm-hmm. And just by being able to think about that, like, okay, wait a minute, I can't deal with the world's problems. I can only handle what we can handle in our household. And let's deal with this, and let's figure out how we handle it and make sure we're moving in the right direction. The crazy thing is, as bad as this pandemic has been on us financially in the short run, from the very beginning, I told Katie, I said, because there was 3 days there, the phone didn't stop ringing, and it got to the end, and it was just, the last one that called me, she's from Wisconsin, and I just kind of chuckled even before she said a word, and she goes, "I guess you know why I'm calling." I said, "Oddly enough, this is not my first call to get in the last 3 days." So yeah, Katie's getting kind of stressed out about all of that, and I kept saying, I said, "It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay." Because what's the one thing I've been complaining about for the last 18 months? And that is, I haven't had enough time to finish some projects that I know are revolutionary, and if we want to start that positive revolution in the world, but I'm on the road 24/7 and as much as possible, now we've just been given an opportunity. We've just been given the one thing I said we didn't have, and that was time. We were able to finish the book. We were able to create a new program that's all going to be electronic, and it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
So it's, how do you pivot? How do you deal with the stress, handle the life stress, so that then you can take care of the daily things that we shouldn't be letting us get us down.
Yeah, and that's basically that Ed Milet concept that we talk about so much on here that we've adopted. It's really helped change my life and the way I view things. And that's, you can view things as happening to you or happening for you. And we choose to view that everything happens for us and not to us. And that's what you've done in that situation, is said, hey, it is what it is. I can't change it. All these speaking gigs is canceled, but I got all these other projects, and you diverted your energy in a positive direction and controlled what you could control.
And one thing, Matt, what you just said about sometimes you don't need to do more, you need to do less. I know my busiest days a lot of times are my least productive. Just when I'm busy, just when I come into office and I'm just everything that comes my way, I try to deal with. A lot of times, when I come to work with three things. These are only three things I'm going to deal with today. I'm only going to do what only I can do. Those are a lot of times my least busy and most productive. And that's where we are with this, especially with quarantine. I mean, nobody's busy for several days, but a lot of times more productive.
That's right. Have you heard of the 80/20 rule?
Oh, yeah.
So the 80/20 rule is one of the things that we teach in like a time management or productivity class or whatever. And it's really true. If what you wear 80% of the time, you wear 20% of what's in your closet. We've got this backwards mentality where we need to be focusing on what is most important and most productive. That 20% that's going to get us the most results, and spending 80% of our time on that. And instead of running from one fire to the other and feeling overwhelmed and feeling like the walls are caving in around us and kids are crying and everything's, wait, stop. We don't ever, we've kind of gotten into a bad habit, and we don't ever, it's one of my favorite stress switches is number 98, I believe. And that is, we don't say no. We don't say no for a lot of reasons. We're afraid of disappointing somebody. We just don't have the courage to tell somebody no for whatever project. But we got to start stopping and at least catching our breath at the beginning of the day, in the middle of the day, at the end of the day, and saying, okay, what's important? What can I control? What do I need to do? What stresses can I handle? What can I not handle? And if I can't handle it, what do I need to do with it? Do I need to give it to somebody else, or do I need to walk away from it because I can't handle it anyway?
Yeah.
So we don't want to ever think that yeah, that's just it. I just think sometimes we just need to slow down. And part of what I think this whole COVID thing has done for us is it has reset us to we're not busy. Like, we're not busy being busy. We're busy being productive. I've gotten more, like you said, and I've gotten more done over these past 2 months or however long it's been. It feels like a decade. That now I'm like, yeah, giddy up. I feel like I'm good to go for another 2 decades. Now I'm like, let's rock and roll this deal, right? Yeah. So it's how do we do less in order to allow us rest, digest, restore, and then be able to give and to do and to be more than we've ever thought we could.
Russ, talk about a little bit more about the gratitude thing you said every morning, because I've heard so many people say that influencers that I listen to and different podcasters, that seems to be a common thread with people to start the day with gratitude.
Um,
How does that work for you?
I'll tell you how I do it, and it's not original. I've heard it, obviously, and Justin knows it. Like Mr. Ziegler's quote on gratitude is one of the best that there are. But I also am a big proponent of what you think about, you bring about. A lot of people have listened or read The Secret and whatever. That's great. There's a section in that where that one lady says she hits the floor, and the first thought she has as her first foot hits the floor is to say thank you. And it's so amazing to me how if you start looking for things to be grateful for, how many more things there are to be grateful for. And in the book and in my life, anytime I get a chance to speak, if I get a chance to tell the story of my Meemaw, I'm going to tell you the story of my Meemaw, and you're going to listen to it and you're going to be moved by it because Meemaw was a special spirit. She was 93 years young when she passed away. And I always laugh. I was like, how many people typically attend a 93-year-old's funeral? Yeah, typically those funerals are kind of small, right?
Right.
I mean, because quite frankly, they beat all their friends. They won, right? So that so she's 93 years old, and to make it even worse, she retired as the manager of the local motor vehicle department. So she ran the DMV, and she was 93 years old. I said we should have had to pay people come to her funeral, and yet at her funeral it was standing room only. And I got the opportunity to preach at her funeral, to speak at her funeral, and it was amazing to me afterwards as people walked by, person after person after person said, "You have no idea what meant to me. She made me feel like I was the most important person in the world. I know I wasn't," and I'm like, "Hey, at that moment, you were to her." She was the type of person. I said in my remarks, I said, if you had told me, Ma, wasn't it sad about all those people who died at the sinking of the Titanic? She would have responded with something like, "Yes, honey, that was so sad, but we should just be grateful for all the people who lived." Like that's how she exuded life. But what most people don't know, and I couldn't say it at the funeral, is she had every reason to be one of the most bitter, selfish, mean people on planet Earth. Her mother died when she was real young. She was raised by her dad. She was one of five kids, and her dad was, in her words, he could be kind of verbally mean to us sometimes. Okay, I can read between the lines there. She then went on to she had to marry my granddad, and and that was in like 1940 something, and that was in a day and a time where that was like scandalous. And then my granddad, I love my granddad, but I don't respect who he was and how he chose to live his life. He was an alcoholic. He was verbally and physically abusive. Yada. I could keep going. And one time in a weak moment, she got to telling me about that. She goes, "I should have left your granddad years ago." She goes, "But that's just not what you did back then." And then she kind of catches herself. She goes, "But he had his good qualities too." And so here's someone who had every right to be mean and negative and self-centered and bitter about how her life had turned out. And yet she was exactly the opposite. She chose to be grateful, and therefore there was so much gratefulness in her that you could not be in her presence and not feel just blessed and filled. So there's a reason so many of us talk about look for things to be grateful for. I mean, let's be honest, there are going to be times in life where you feel like it's so bad that the only thing you can find to be grateful for is the next breath you take. I get it. We've all probably been there at some point and on some level. But man, if you just look around, there's so much we have that we could be so physically and eternally grateful for. And the more you look at it, the more you're going to find it. And wow, it's amazing how stress is so much easier to handle when you have so many things to be thankful for.
Oh, yeah, that's good. Real good.
And that's just in the past year. Have I really, with just persistence, made sure that I've started my days that way. And I mean, we've grown to a place in business where we deal with so much more now, from a stress level than we ever have before. Uh, you know, just competitiveness being a target to a lot of other companies, a lot of other people, and then on things inside of our own company, dealing with people. When you got people, you got problems, and the more and more people you
Yep.
get, the more problems you have to be able to lead people through and deal with. And so I have found that has kept me sane. But like Mr. Ziegler said, that gratitude is the healthiest of all human emotions. And so when you're starting your day with the healthiest human emotion that you can have, I mean, it's like, why do you want to get up and throw junk food in your body right off the bat? I mean, you've been asleep all night, your body's been fasting, you want it to absorb something that's going to permeate every cell in that body, that's going to be beneficial for the body. And you want to do the same thing for your life, for your mind, for your mental state every morning. And when you get up and that's the first thought that, you get up and you're focused on, and you're just intentional to make sure that you get up and you start verbalizing those things you're thankful for. And a lot of mornings for me, it's as simple as, I know the ice cold shower is a big thing in Achiever's life yet, where they shock themselves, with
Yeah.
in a plunge pool or an ice cold shower. I'm not
Yeah, I
quite
ain't
ready
there
to
yet.
go to that level yet. But I mean, for
hard
me,
pass on that one.
it's just, thank God that I got warm water. I'm getting up, shower, a good cup of coffee, and a wife and a child that's healthy. And you just start those basic things, and when you do that, it's amazing what it does
Right.
for your entire mental state. And it sounds, I've had people say, "Oh, well, that sounds frou-frou," and that's just feel good and you're okay, I'm okay stuff. And I'm like, well, that's why life's kicking your butt all the time.
That's right.
And why the rest of us is making it and doing something, and so it's just, and I want to say one thing too that comes to mind when you was mentioning earlier, just to touch on real quick, because we just done a podcast on relationships. Was our last podcast we talked about, was overcoming negative relationships. And you were talking about go-tos earlier, and what I want to encourage listeners to make sure they're careful of, because you were joking, talking about, when you come home, had a bad day at school, it was never, here's a bowl of broccoli, here's a cake or a slice of pie or a candy bar. It's normally things that we fill that void with, that's not good for us. Rough day, you come home, you might drink too much or whatever your deal is. But one, I tell you, a very common go-to for a lot of folks that suffer from stress and that get down in that hole, and that go-to is to go to somebody else that's a negative Nancy or a stressed person. They go to that person that always lives, because misery does love company. And it's a lot easier for people to go find a buddy that's down in the ditch too. And we all know who we can call. We all know that person that's always
right.
negative, that's always down, that's always got a bad perspective and perception of life and the situation that's going on around them. So we know if we want to get a hit, and hit the vein with that one. I mean, we know who to go to. We know who to pick up the phone and call, and they'll sit there and cry with you and tell you how bad their day was too. And well, stuff just works out for other people. It's not meant for us. And don't worry, my husband was a deadbeat too, and that's why you dealing with this relationship. And I've seen it even recently. I've seen people that are in marital situations where the marriage is struggling, and what do you see? You see the person that is in the marriage, they don't go to somebody with a healthy marriage that's going to counsel them, that's going to say, this is what you need to do. This is the positive aspect to take. This is the life changes you need to bring. What do you see? I've seen it over and over again, 10 years, pastoring in the ministry. I've seen it lately with some people's situations. When instead of going to somebody that can help them, they run to the person that's another person, friend of theirs, that's going through a divorce, and then they buddy up.
That's right.
Beat the hell out of their spouses to one another, and it's a common thing that a lot of people do, because it's a lot easier to go waller in the mud, with another pig than it is to take the energy to get up on the hill and get yourself washed off and clean your mental state and get to thinking about it the right way. It takes a lot more work to do that than it does to do. I mean, it's no different. It takes a whole lot more work to go to the gym and work out and get healthy than it does to sit on the couch and eat Cheetos and watch Netflix. But
That's right.
Hey, that's my go-to.
Oh, my bad. but you've got to want it. You've got to want it bad enough, And so just make, for those of you that's listening, I mean, that's the last person you need to be go to. Because let me tell you something. Some people live through chaotic situations periodically, but other people, the chaos lives in them. And
That's right.
And you need to know the difference, because what most people do is they run to that go-to person that's always in a state of chaos because it's inside of them.
That's right. You know what? And there's an activity that I do in some of my trainings that we put on, and I won't go through the whole thing, but part of it boils down to who's in your inner circle. Who are you turning to? Are they lifting you up, or are they pulling you down? Just like what you just said. And there are times when we have to make the decision to turn some of those switches off and start limiting our amount of inputs that we're getting from those people. Now, granted, I've never called any of them and said, by the way, you're out of circle, or I'm going to turn your switch off. I just intentionally started spending less time with them. I started distancing myself from them. You can do things sometimes gradually if you aren't in the place to just peel the Band-Aid off.
That's right.
And maybe that's not your personality. Okay, well, take a first step, find someone that's going to help you fill your cup with the good, the positive, and the pure, because that's what we're supposed to be putting in. And anyone who attempts to put something other in than we know where that's coming from. And it's not from the good, the positive, or the pure. I was just a week before last, I was doing a coaching session with a lady, and she had a major stress moment, and she said, I just don't know what to do. And I said, well, I'm going to correct you there, because you do know what to do. You're just not wanting to make the decision to do it.
Mm.
And she said, ow, ouch, that just hurt. And I said, well, that's the reality. We all know what we're supposed to be putting into our bodies, yet we choose not to. So then we get run down, we get weak, we get faint, and then we either want somebody to tell us that that's where we're supposed to be, or somebody to kick us in the pants. And like my daddy always said, even a kick in the pants is a move in the right direction.
Yeah.
So at least you're pushing forward. So yeah, let's start. If we're going to start dealing with stress, one of the biggest ones we can deal with is the people that we're associating with. I get that there may be sometimes, maybe you're married to them, and then you're going to have to start filling your cup in a way that then you can handle that, or you're going to have to deal with it. So yeah, watch what are the inputs? What are we doing to ourselves? None of this is rocket science. The book could be read by an 8-year-old or a 108-year-old, because the principles are the principles. We don't need to overcomplicate any of this. Stop what we can stop so that we can handle what we got to handle, so that we can be who we need to be.
That's right. Absolutely. And well, brother, this has been a gooder podcast.
Hey, I've enjoyed it, man.
This might be one of the gooderest podcasts we've had.
Well, y'all made it gooder. I'll tell you that. That's a fact. Hey, and if somebody needs more information, I know you mentioned it at the first, but they can info@stressfreeyou.net is the email. Feel free to shoot us a message, or go on Facebook. It's mattrush.com on Facebook. Instagram is _MattRush. Katie and I are the ones who deal with all that, so it's coming directly to us. I promise we'll do anything we can to help anybody, whether that be through the book on Amazon, through Audible's coming soon. You can also get it on Kindle, Kindle version. And I'm just saying we'll do anything we can to help anybody start to deal with stress, because I know once we deal with stress, then we're going to be able to start putting in some stuff that fills your soul and allows you to become who you need to be. And that's what makes us all truly way more gooder.
Well, guys, listen, everybody, make sure you get the book, Stress Free You, Discover How to Turn Off Stress with the Flick of a Switch. Matt Rush, Rich Taylor, Phenomenal read. We've barely scratched the surface today. There's so much value in this book. Go to Amazon today, get it. Go check out Matt Rush on all the social media platforms. I promise you'll be all the better for knowing him, for following him, and for drinking from that well. I mean, he's just a well of positivity. It helps me a lot of times, and it's helped me tremendously. Just a lot of times catching posts and things that he's put up and put out there. So we want to encourage you. Make sure you're getting your White Buffalo apparel, your gear. Go to agentsresourcegroup.com. Make sure you're liking, subscribing, sharing with the nation, okay? If you're not part of the Separation Nation, you need to learn what it's all about. You'll want to be part of it. And we'll see you here again on the next podcast.